this on? Can you hear me out there? Raise your hand in the back. Thank you. Okay. So good afternoon. I am Gil Cedillo. This is the Immigrant Affairs, Civil Rights and Equity Committee. Thursday, September 6, 2018. John Ferraro, Council Chamber Room, 340 City Hall. Please, everybody, turn off your phones. I am joined by Laurie Martinez, Councilwoman from the Valley, and Mr. Curran Price from the New Ninth, and we are ready to proceed. We start with general comment. Mr. Herman, you want to come up? And Mr. Kwan, you want to make yourself available? You have 3 minutes, sir.
So we all know what it's like to have children, especially children that are unoccupied and their mommies forget to take them out of a public meeting. You see, you can't accuse people by defamation and slander that because of my stance here at the podium, I engage with legalities entered by the United States.
Mr. Herman.
I'm on topic. I'm talking in regards to the United States. I'm an American citizen.
I need you to focus that a little bit more on the subject matter of the committee.
I've been wrestled by the city of Los Angeles, who made slanderous comments about Wayne Spiller and myself for endangering children on item 5. Now on item 6, I know what it's like for the establishment of a civil human rights commission. However, incidentally, there is none here in the city of Los Angeles because my human rights have been violated by Herman Jason Wesson, and how to allocate and proceed from such penalties and perjury by slander and defamation of character, simply because you find my First Amendment, my protected speech, offensive. The oversight and decisions made by a few individuals like Mommy up there and Mr. Bonin and Mr. Krikorian is offensive to us, the public speakers, using SLAPP, strategic lawsuits against the public, for engaging in protected speech. See, I don't have to say a fucking bad word to any fucking motherfucker. Although I am in the jurisdiction by the decisions my mind decides to outcast to the city attorney, fuck you, under 42 U.S.C. 1983. And then I go into number 7, Board of Police Commissioners, initial human trafficking. Well, you know what human trafficking is? LAUSD. And Mommy Martinez knows what I'm talking about.
Please do not direct
trafficking children, and we're going to now have a human trafficking task force. Well, stop Jose Huizar. He was trafficking prostitution here at City Hall. Why don't we stop the operations of the Valley of Bureau Operations, South Central or Central Bureau, that of West Bureau of Los Angeles Police Department, for stop fucking children? And I'm referring to the cadet program where you allow children to go unoccupied or unaccompanied by their parents while police were fucking cadets and fucking our children.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Mr. Kwan, welcome.
Thank you. As for item 5, the motion on unaccompanied children, I'd like to thank the council for ensuring the expansion in the Justice Fund covered not just children, but their respective parents and sponsors. I hope next year council continues its commitment to the Justice Fund beyond these first 2 years. On item 6, it's great to see the council moving forward on its human rights ordinance. I want to thank this committee, the Immigrant Affairs Advocate, City Attorney's Office, and CLA for their work in advancing this issue. I would note that council should consider diversifying who will be able to appoint commission members. These selections are really important, and council approval isn't enough. I strongly believe we get the best makeup of our commissions when there's a diffusion of appointment power. This commission is a key component of our city's commitment to equity. Just this week, many of you spoke passionately about the importance of equity as you debated regulating electric scooters. Our council president noted, quote, "If we're going to turn this city around, equity is going to have to be involved with every conversation." While many of us are aware of the inequities across the city, it's important to face the cold hard facts about this contrast. While we have a diverse city council across many demographics, we continue to lag with representation of women on city council. In the late 90s, we saw an all-time high of 5 council members that were women. And in the 20 years since, we've struggled to maintain a fraction of that fraction. An accessible public financing system with meaningful matching funds will go a long way in encouraging more women to run for local office. Fundraising in some districts is far easier than others. A few examples from the most recent Chamber of Commerce report. Council District 11 has a median household income of $85,000 per year, compared to just $33,000 in Council District 8. Council District 11 has half the unemployment rate. Our systemic failures can be seen most readily in one stat. 65% of CD11 residents over 25 have a bachelor's degree, while in CD8 that number is just 6.4%. The most important conversation we can have about equity lies in our electoral process, and I look forward to the council doing so soon. We must show that this is a city for the many and not just the moneyed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kwan. I appreciate your comments. I encourage you to think about funding and funding streams for the, as we go forward, for our Justice Fund. We are using general fund, but it's limited, and I think we have to think if we're going to fund at the levels that we need, we're going to have to find some independent funding stream. I encourage you to think about that. Thank you. That closes public comment. We are now prepared to address items 1 through 4. We are prepared to do those. Those are reappointments to the commission. We thank these volunteer commissioners. Irene Tovad is a giant in our community. Mark Rothman, thank you for your service. Angela Solis Moreno, and our new commissioner, Harold Samijian. You may want to stand up so we can recognize you. I thank you for your service. All of you new commissioners, thank you for your service. Motion to reaffirm on consent? So moved. So moved. Thank you. No objection? Okay, so that addresses items 1 through 4. Item 5. Moises, are you here? Moises Carrillo? You've got 1 minute for public comment.
Good afternoon. Chair Cedillos, members of City Council. My name is Moises Carrillo, and I'm a director at Catholic Charities of Los Angeles. We're here to support the motion this afternoon for the unaccompanied minors. Catholic Charities is one of the agencies that has been serving unaccompanied minors and immigrant services for a number of years. This year, we are also assisting those families that have been separated at the borders, and we're currently serving over 50 families. I first want to thank the City Office of Immigrant Affairs, who have assisted us significantly with their services through the City of LA and their Family Source Centers and a number of departments. And I certainly appreciate their willingness to work with us and provide those services. We'll continue to serve our families, but as mentioned, we certainly are in need of funds, and we'll continue to do our part to raise our funding so that we continue to serve our families in need. I did again want to thank the City Council and the Mayor for their support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let's move to item 5.
Would you like me to read it into the record, sir?
Yes, please.
Item 5 is a motion, Martinez Rodriguez, relative to instructing the chief legislative analyst to report regarding regarding unaccompanied children illegally entering into the United States and being resettled in the city of Los Angeles.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Felipe Chavez, and I'm here to report on a motion, Martinez Rodriguez, and a CLA report. The motion instructed our office to report on how unaccompanied children are being resettled in the city of Los Angeles and to identify any city resources or programs that could be made available to unaccompanied children. Our office met with identified several departments that actually currently provide immigration services, and that was the Housing, Community, and Investment Department, and also the Library Department. We also met with immigrant advocates such as the Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, the Central American Resource Center, Immigrant Defenders Law Center, and Public Counsel, who provided valuable input with respect to unaccompanied minors. The immigrant advocates basically provided concerns or expressed concerns over the treatment and processing of unaccompanied minors from the moment they enter the United States and are detained by federal immigration services. They also expressed concerns relative to declining funding that was previously earmarked for legal representation through the U.S. Department of Housing and Health and Human Services. The HCID is here to basically provide some information with regards to the services they're currently providing through the Family Source Centers. And a few additional points that I'd like to make. We also looked into the possibility of expanding the Justice Fund to provide services for unaccompanied minors and children who have been separated from their families due to their immigration status. Our report does include several recommendations, one of which is an instruction for HCID to coordinate and develop a framework to coordinate responsibilities and establish procedures for the referral of unaccompanied minors and minors who have been separated from their families to family source centers and to report to council in 4 to 5 days. We also request the library department to report on any programs or services that may be utilized to assist unaccompanied minors, including recommendations to leverage any efforts with other city departments. And lastly, we recommend that the City Council request the California Community Foundation to report on how current legal services provide or have used funds to assist unaccompanied minors, and to report on any strategy to utilize the LA Justice Fund to assist minors who have been separated from their families. HCID is also here in case you have any questions in relation to services they currently provide.
Good afternoon, council members. Abigail Marquez, Assistant General Manager with the Housing and Community Investment Department. I appreciate Councilmember Martinez for introducing this motion. I want to share that we had already been in conversations with both the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and the county in leveraging our family source system to provide support to these children and families. Our family source system is comprised of 16 family source centers that are located throughout the city in the highest concentrations of poverty, helping families that are low income and need of additional resources and support. We serve approximately on an annual basis over 50,000 unduplicated low-income residents across the city through the family source system. Over the years, this was also a motion that was authored by Councilmember Cedillo. We also have legal service providers on site that they either have a subcontractual relationship with, or they have a strong referral system in place to refer families that are in need of legal services and also immigration services. That is also funded by the Family Source contract. We offer a wide range of services, including intensive case management services to all of our clients. And through this work, we've identified a liaison across all 16 Family Source centers that will be the point of contact when families are being referred. We have our Family Source program manager who's here, who's also been part of these conversations. The way that we've set it up with the county is that they will initially reach out to our Family Source Program Manager. She has already a list of all the liaisons that are specific for this purpose, for these children, because we understand that this is priority and we need to make sure that we are quick to respond and are providing the most comprehensive level of service to these children and their families. And then we will triage from that point. We also offered in our conversations with the mayor's office and the county to train the county system on the Family Source system so that they know how to appropriately refer families that are seeking services. And we're happy that the recommendation does include also engaging with the city's 311 system to do the same, to provide them with an overview of Family Source services so that they know if they get a phone call from anyone that is seeking services, know how to refer them to the Family Source system. The last thing I'll mention is that we also have, LAUSD has been part of these conversations. The Family Source system also has a formal contractual relationship with the school district where we have pupil service and attendance counselors that are co-located at our Family Source Center. So if a child is being referred, they don't have to be referred to a school. The PSA counselor can do that assessment on site at the Family Source Center and then connect that child and their family to their appropriate educational resources.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And Mr. Cedillo, thank you so much for scheduling this motion in committee. Members, I just have to say that I really think it's an atrocity that in 2018 we have to hold these serious conversations to talk about reunifying children with their parents. And then we have to sit here and find resources to help these innocent children to cope with trauma and, by actions that were made by this administration. So I commend you both for putting all the resources together, but I also think it's important for this council to understand the reunification process and what resources are available to help our families. And I think we also need to understand what our role is as a city and a city council to better understand how to protect these kids. But I have the following questions for you. Since you talked a little bit about the family work source centers, can you talk about, were you already servicing unaccompanied children before the current administration took office? Or are these new services that you are now providing as a result of resources we were already providing to children in general? Or are these new services that you're providing after the administration has taken this action?
The Family Source system can serve anyone who is a City of LA resident who meets the income qualifications. So we don't ask questions on their legal status. So we do have the ability as a system, because of the funding that is in place to support the system, to serve anyone. So I would say that we don't even ask the question around whether they have a Social Security number, but I would say that the vast majority of the clients that we do currently serve and have been serving historically are undocumented families. Now, because of this urgent situation, we have sort of streamlined our process so that we can expedite any type of referral or service for these children or their families as they're being released and being reintegrated into the city. So these are services that we're leveraging. They're not new services. This is services that were already in place that we want to make sure that become available as quickly and as comprehensively as possible for this population.
So what additional information do families need in order for them to access services from a Family Source Center? Are there any specific documentations, anything, additional paperwork that they need in order for their children to receive services? What does that look like?
No, they don't need any documentation.
And are you currently training or providing special instruction to your providers who are licensed to run these Family Source Centers in dealing with unaccompanied minors and all the current immigration dilemmas that some families are facing? Are you currently training your staff?
So that's an excellent question. So what we've done is we have updated our system providers that this is a priority and that they've helped to identify that liaison across all 16 Family Source Centers. I would say that the next step would be to provide them a more detailed detailed, comprehensive overview of the particular challenges that this population is having and how we can help support. We haven't done that yet. Again, a lot of them already have a legal service provider on site, and it's an immigration service provider, so they have that relationship with Caresen and Chirla and all those different organizations that are co-located. But I do think that there is an opportunity to also do a training specific for this project.
So in your report, you also talk about the library's New American centers, and you're planning to expand those centers to other branches. If so, when is that going to happen? I know it's the Central Library has a center. The Pacoima branch, I believe, also has a center. I'm forgetting the other two. There might be one in Wilmington as well. I just want to know if you're expanding the centers, and if so, when and how many other branches are you going to be in?
So we included just preliminary a review of the actual program and the services they provide, but we have an instruction in our report that asks the library department to come back and report on their actual services, and in case there are any services that are geared towards unaccompanied minors, they would do that as well. I think that in combination with recommendation number 1, which asks HCID to basically coordinate with Immigration Advocates as well as LAUSD and the county, they would probably come back with recommendations on how to enhance all the services that currently exist to assist unaccompanied minors and separated children as well.
Do you have anything else to add, Abby? And so my final question, Mr. Chair, before I move on this item, is there a centralized source information service providers when we're reunifying children that are coming to the LA area? Is there a centralized process by which we identify them and identify quickly what resources they need? Have we figured that piece out?
So we did have initial or preliminary conversations with the Immigration Advocates, and they did say that some of them are automatically referred through the Office of Refugee Resettlement. They're referred to attorneys or these organizations for legal representation, but there are many who do not have that vehicle to be connected to city services. But I think the intent of these recommendations are to kind of explore that and then come back with solid recommendations to address that issue.
That concludes my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Price? What's your sense of unmet needs? Do you have any issues, areas that you feel that we could be doing more that we're not? And then the second is, with respect to that, I know that this is a kind of emergency response to a unanticipated situation, but we will continue to have challenges and issues regarding immigration after this president departs, which may be sooner than later. What type of long-term strategies do you have for funding, specific funding in these areas?
In terms of unmet needs, I think, again, from our conversations with the Immigrant Advocates, I think there is a potential disconnect between the organizations and potential city resources or services that could be made available. So I think increasing that communication or facilitating that through possibly HCID, that would improve the relationship, and also, we'd be able to bring the services that are needed to those children. In terms of the funding, I defer to the department.
So the response that I would add is that, yes, I do agree that there is an opportunity to streamline the referral process. So as children are being seen by immigration providers, to make sure that there is a strong connection with the service provider community so that no one is sort of falling behind, and there's a seamless transition from legal services to social services, which is where our family source system can play a huge role. I would also say that there is a shortage, and from what I've heard over and over repeatedly from the legal service provider community, is that there is a shortage of funding for us to have additional and proper legal representation for these families. So that's been a constant reoccurring challenge that I've heard. And then the last thing I'll say is that our family source system has the capacity to provide intensive case management services. We have clinical social workers on site. We can leverage our resources with the county, mental health, with LAUSD, but there's still a shortage when it comes to housing. So that is still an area that we're concerned about, because if families are in need of housing, our resources are very limited and they're not flexible in nature, where if we need to help house a person, I think that's where, in these conversations we continue to explore how we can better respond, because that is absolutely an unmet need, is really helping them with housing.
Mr. Chair, may I ask Mr. Peter Shea to come to the table? I know that he represents all the detainee immigrant minors through the Flores class action settlement, and I'd like for him to comment on this motion. And I know he's met with several of our city departments as well to brief them on the Flores class action settlement. So I'd like you to comment on this motion and how it relates to the settlement and the minors you represent.
Right, thank you. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. We are through the Center for Human Rights here in Los Angeles. We do serve as the lead counsel in what's called the Flores versus Sessions case. And in this case, which we filed in 1985, we reached a nationwide settlement in 1997. That settlement to this day sets the national standards for both the treatment of minors immigrant minors in federal custody and their release, circumstances under which they'll be released, who will they be released to. And that remains very active in the courts, because President Trump is trying to unravel that settlement, and it's pending right here in the federal court in Los Angeles. So we tend to be right in the center of this issue right now. And we also, as part of the terms of that settlement, we're the only group in the country that has the authority to enter into any detention facility, about 80 facilities nationwide, several in California, that we have the right to enter those facilities, interview all of our class members, which is every detained minor. And that allows us to get a sense of which of those minors intend to come to Los Angeles, which of those minors, who among those minors have mothers or fathers or relatives who are living in Los Angeles. And when we go in and interview these minors in custody, we also have the ability to bring in physicians and mental health specialists. So we're in a position to assess the needs, and if they're accompanied, we also interview the parents. So we have interviewed just in the past 2 months literally hundreds of detained minors, and we've interviewed hundreds of detained parents, many of whom were coming to Los Angeles. And because we're accompanied by physicians and mental health specialists, we try to do a comprehensive assessment of their needs. So having said that, I did about 6 weeks ago meet with various folks from different city departments to try to assess what the city is doing, what the city could be doing. I would certainly support any efforts that you would make to ensure that some portion of the Justice Fund's resources can be made available to this population. When the Justice Fund was conceived, the argument was that there were certain immigrants in detention without lawyers, and that they were the most vulnerable, and that's what the target should be for the Justice Fund. Well, there are 90,000 children a year in custody. Now, obviously, not all of those are coming to Los Angeles, but several thousand are, and because of the large Central American population here. And so I would certainly support the notion they're even more vulnerable than the adults who are in custody, who the Justice Fund kind of initially focused on. This is really even a more vulnerable population, and a population that is desperately in need not only of additional legal representation, which the Justice Fund, I guess, could potentially address, but also on a broader level in terms of Los Angeles. And I would hope that we could continue a dialogue and plus the folks I met with before, because there's clearly, the housing is clearly a big need. And so one of the things I've been planning on is a meeting with Peter, the director over at LASA, and we've put together a directory of homeless youth shelters and family sort of shelters that we are actually starting to distribute to kids in custody before they get released to Los Angeles, so they have a sense of what's available in terms of shelters. But there's I would say the housing is a huge need. Mental health is probably the second biggest, and so there I think there needs to be. I have recruited hundreds of mental health specialists who are willing to volunteer to provide mental health services when kids are first released from custody. But I think somehow integrating that with whatever services the city or the county might provide would be very important. I think I know this isn't directly, I think, in your jurisdiction, but I think involvement of LAUSD to have a newcomer school. So I think that component needs to be put together. So there's 3 or 4 critical components that I think if the city council expresses the importance of providing services through its various bureaus, departments, whatever, in addition to whatever you want to say about the Justice Fund, I think all of that could be tremendously helpful to those children and those who accompany their mothers or their fathers who have Los Angeles as their destination, or who were recently united or reunited with family members here in Los Angeles. So I really thank you for your interest in this topic. There'll be a lot of news about this today. So today and tomorrow you'll see a lot of news because President Trump just today proposed federal regulations to wipe out the Flores settlement and to wipe out the protections that it provides to children. Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a number of inquiries this morning. A couple of women friends of mine held a press conference to oppose the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh, and the settlement agreement came up. So thank you very much. That's one of the reasons I wanted you to come and brief us on this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bryce, anyone else? You're good? Okay, we are going to adopt the recommendation. Is that our action? To adopt?
Can I make one suggestion?
Yes, sure, please.
Certainly don't have a problem with approving the recommendations, but I want to add an instruction, if I may.
Sure, please.
I want to add that we instruct you to come back with a report on the outreach strategies that would be necessary once the framework for the referrals to the family source centers are finalized. Okay? Thank you.
And I would add obviously, to also report back on funding strategies. We need to know where the Justice Fund is, how we can anticipate it for the future. We've obviously gone beyond what the original scope was thought of. Challenges confront us every day. So maybe some suggestions and a conversation to report back on how we could make it more robust and more operational for the challenges that confront us. Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, these are recommendations for the CLA?
Sure.
Yes, I meant to say that. I thought you had moved to approve the CLA recommendations, and then I added my instructions there.
Thank you.
Yep. ¿Algo más? Anything else? No. Motion adopted. Thank you. Item number 6. We have public comment.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to read the item?
Read the item, and then we want to get public comment.
Item number 6 is a report from the city attorney with the proposed ordinance and a report from the chief legislative analyst relative to establishing a Civil and Human Rights Commission, executive director position, and a Los Angeles Civil and Human Rights Ordinance.
Great. Let's hear from the public first. Mr. Shea, we'll call you up in a minute, but let's hear public comment first. Halisi Ron Price. Brian McNeil, Pastor Q Jamari, Jen Marie, Show King, and Hector Wiesel. Start off with.
Got 1 minute. I thought it was 3 minutes. Okay. My name is Ron Price, retired sheet metal worker, Local 105, former organizer for Local 105. Just wanted to speak briefly since I got 1 minute. There's challenges in the construction industry when it comes to job and racial discrimination, and we need this preemption to be lifted and the local enforcement take place. We need on-site monitoring of the construction sites. We have a lot of young people who got hired over the years. They work for a couple of weeks, get laid off, get counted, but then they lay back out in the streets again. So we need effective enforcement on site. And we've made some great strides at state level, but still a lot of work needs to be done. We need to enforce discrimination laws.
Thank you. Pastor.
Hi, I'm Brian McNeil. I worked for Airport Services at LAX approximately in 2010 as a loader and ramp agent driver. I was a victim of discrimination and harassment while being injured on the job, rendering me disabled due to poor working conditions. The company was ordered by LAX to give us a raise in pay from $12 to $15.75. The company pressured and forced employees to pay for a very expensive medical insurance coverage that completely absorbed the pay raise. We never even received medical insurance enrollment or coverage information, while the company continued to charge us. I had nowhere to go and I felt hopeless. Even today, companies continue to get away with violating workers' rights. We desperately need stronger anti-discrimination language and local enforcement of workers' rights and complaints. Thank you all for your time and concern in this matter.
Pastor.
Pastor Q Jean-Marie from the Church Without Walls, Skid Row, and also from Clergy and Lady United for Economic Justice. In order to achieve proper enforcement of civil and human rights, we're asked that we put enforceable language in the ordinance. We also need adequate funding and resources in order to achieve civil and human rights. For instance, the Intercontinental Airport hotel, had an agreement with Unite Here that they would hire, I believe it was 15% African Americans. They end up hiring, out of 800 people, they end up hiring 15 black folks. 15 out of 800. And so there's discrimination across the board. And if I go back to my scripture, God says to Moses, I've seen the oppression of my people, and I've heard their cries. God hears and God sees.
Joe King.
Peace and blessings. My name is Miss King. I am a descendant of the man who spoke of his dream. Yes, Dr. King. I taught at Star EDU for a couple of years and experienced discrimination. The worst of my fears brought me to tears. And despite a good performance, I never got a promotion. And then I voiced my concerns, so that caused some commotion. When I was out on a leave of disability, I was harshly terminated, effective immediately. I was distressed, depressed, very anxious, I confess, taking over my health and all of my little wealth. You know what I'm talking about? But I'm here today to voice my support for the laws for you to enforce. So please do the right thing by including workplace discrimination. Yes, that's the main thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Hector Hueso.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Hector Wesso with Jobs to Move America. Today we're standing with the LA Black Workers Center and others in support of local enforcement and support of LA's working families who need local remedies and solutions to address unfair hiring, unfair labor practices, and blatant discrimination on the job happening right here in our own communities. We urge a speedy passage and adoption of this ordinance, and we urge strong implementation to ensure that working Angelinos have a fair shot at justice in the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you. Manuel Villanueva, Lola Smallwood Cuevas, Daniel Doset, Robert Hernandez.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Lola Smallwood Cuevas. I'm one of the co-founders of the LA Black Workers Center. I am, along with our constituents, very, very excited about this ordinance. It's been a long time coming. Right now, as we speak, 50% of black workers are unemployed and underemployed. Despite having the highest education levels in history in the city of Los Angeles, 2/3 of our folks are relegated to frontline, non-supervisorial jobs, keeping them in low wages. Discrimination is a job killer in our communities, and it limits the ability of workers to advance and sustain their families and communities. But though we are excited about what is happening here and the work that you all are doing to strengthen and protect black and brown workers, we want to see three things. One, we push for you to ensure that there is co-enforcement with a partnership that is formal and funded with the Bureau of Contracts Administration. And we also push for you to implement right away a public education campaign that will educate workers on their rights so that they know the important work of this commission and they understand where to go when their complaints need to be addressed. And so we ask you to move this forward quickly.
I thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Manuel Villanueva, and I'm the lead organizer with the Restaurant Opportunity Center. In the restaurant industry, we suffer from a lot of violations that are clearly displayed, but can hardly be enforced, such discrimination. The restaurants are segregated. People that look like me often don't get positions in the kitchen, and we're segregated there. We're not allowed to go into the front unless you're pretty, unless you have connections. A lot of us are deprived from opportunities for higher income. In our organization, we provide training for workers so they can get opportunities in other sectors of the restaurants. We help them with the resume and interview skills, but still they get rejected. So we need you to please have, including stronger language, for us to be able to report and enforce the discrimination that happens in the restaurants that you eat every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. See you, Daniel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Doucette. I'm with the Los Angeles Black Workers Center. I've been at LA County EMT for 10 years, and I want to talk a little bit about my experiences with workforce discrimination that have negatively affected my employment and my life. Having fulfilled the pre-apprenticeship boot camp with the LABWC for the local painters union, it is important because without programs like these, I'll be without the necessary resources I need to even be able to be eligible for such incredible chance to advance. We need local enforcement now to ensure that all workers have the chance for a job opportunity like these. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Robert Hernandez. I was a ramp worker for 15 years. I've been discriminated against by higher level management. They claimed that I had a DUI, and I didn't, but yet they let me go. This has affected me, especially mentally, in the fact that me as a man providing for my family and my family members, mentally, because I was like
got hit in the chest, and all the wind from me escaped. And I was wondering, what's my next move mentally? Because it just shook me. And then financially, and then my pride as well. I'm here today because I support local enforcement, local discrimination and anti-discrimination laws. Please do the right thing. Please do the right thing by including workplace discrimination acts in the ordinance. Thank you.
Laurie James, Guillermo Torres, Levon Carruthers, Xochitl Sanchez.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the many pastors, African American pastors, Latino pastors, and our network of interfaith leaders in our organization, we're here to support stronger language in this human rights ordinance. Enforcement and accountability for, as you heard Pastor Q said, even with a contract that Unite Here had with an Intercontinental Hotel that you guys, that the city approved and gave perks for, out of 800 people, they only hired 14 African Americans. In construction sites, when you pass there, how many African Americans do you see at construction sites working there? So it's very sad that the people who brought us the civil rights movement, who brought us consciousness against so much hate in the past, now are victims of discrimination in many of the industries today, including the hospitality industry, construction industry, and other industries. We must, we stand with them, and we ask you that we're here in support with our brothers and sisters, because we must go beyond our own people, and that's what God calls us to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee and community. My name is Levon Carruthers. I just want to say that anti-black hiring discrimination is prevalent as today as it was in 1989. Researchers looked at two kinds of experiments, resumes and in-person applications. They sent out resumes with similar levels of education, experience, and so on, but the names differ, with some having stereotypically black or Latino names and the others stereotypically white names. The second applicants go out in person to apply for a job. They each share the same qualifications, but some are white while others are black or Latino. They concluded that on average, white applicants receive 36% more callbacks than equally qualified African Americans. Whites make up more than 80% of the country's workers, 96% farm managers and ranchers, 92% construction managers, 91% carpenters, and 90% CEOs. Today, equality still eludes us. 30% of African American workers make poverty level wages. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Xochitl Sanchez. I'm an organizer with CARECEN, the Central American Research Center. I'm here in solidarity with the Los Angeles Black Worker Center and to demand stronger language around enforcement for this civil and human rights ordinance. We need to connect these discriminatory practices to the homelessness issue being exacerbated, being seen in Los Angeles. We know and recognize that the highest percentage of these people happen to be black people. We need to make these connections. We need to expose the reasons why these discriminatory practices are leading to houselessness and homelessness in Los Angeles. One thing specifically around enforcement, there needs to be a co-enforcement relationship between the Bureau of Contract Administration and the Civil Rights Commission to enforce employment and discrimination ordinances, specifically at the local level. This needs to include to expand the right to issue subpoenas, access workplaces, and expand scope of charges based on investigation at the local level, models that have been enforced in New York and Chicago. And I think that we need to do the same for our black workers in Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you. Laurie James, Eli Longnecker, Mindy Garland, Akili.
My name is Eli Longnecker. I'm the coordinator for the Los Angeles Worker Center Network. We represent immigrant workers in low-wage industries and workers of color. We are here with the Black Worker Center, one of our members, IDEPSCA, Carecen, warehouse workers, Clean Car Wash Campaign, and other orgs are part of our network. We fought in the last few years to get the minimum wage ordinance passed, which also established the local office of wage standards. Similar to wage theft claims, discrimination claims at the state level take more than a year on average to get results, which we know is, people need results immediately. The impact is immediate. So we support the call for local enforcement of anti-discrimination protections in LA, which also includes allocating adequate funding proportional to our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings, community members and committee members. My name is Laurie James. As a former administrative investigator with the County of Los Angeles, I've seen firsthand how it takes for so long for an answer. It can take up to a year or more. As the only African American in my unit, I was tasked with training staff, whether they were a higher level than me or the same level as me. Once everyone was trained, my investigative reports started getting marked up, and I received a competent on my performance evaluation. But everyone I trained received a very good evaluation. This type of discrimination has led me to support LA's Civil and Human Rights Ordinance. I humbly ask that you please move this ordinance forward. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mindy Garland, and I'm representing the Los Angeles Black Worker Center. I'm here to urge you all not to wait before preemption is lifted to act. In 2016, DFEH received over 23,000 complaints. 86 of these were complaints alleged with employment discrimination. Further, under this Trump administration, we have seen hundreds of investigator positions at the EOC and the Department of Labor eliminated, in addition to dramatic budget cuts to federal labor standards and civil rights enforcement. It is safe to say that the federal government alone cannot effectively address employment discrimination claims in our city. However, the city can prevent, discourage, or respond to employment discrimination by culturally appropriate outreach, education about FEHA rights and statutory time limits for complaints, referrals to the department, investigation, fact gathering, including gathering through subpoenas, workplace site visits, collection of data, mediation, intake assistance, and outreach, referral to the department, and partnerships with community-based organizations. So again, council members, I urge you all to not wait before preemption is lifted to act. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Akili.
Good afternoon. My name's Akili. I'm with the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute and the Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance. And the fact that I'm here today is an indication of how far we've come back. We have to come here today to fight for civil rights to be applied at the local level, in large part because it has been dismantled at the state and federal level. So what you do here today puts you on the right side of history. We want you to make sure that your decision, because we know you're going to make the right decision, but is also in collaborations with the departments that already exist, so that you don't have to create it from scratch. And then finally, for me, this is the most critical piece. You have to put the money there. If you don't fully fund it and fund it appropriately, it's just words on paper. So you have an opportunity now to do the right thing, fund the right thing, and be ahead and on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Pastor Smart here? Pastor William Smart? Brother, where are you hiding way back there? I got Malcolm Harris. Please join us. Sir, welcome to the committee. We're very flattered to have you with us this afternoon.
Cedillo, Ms. Martinez, and Mr. Price, and to other distinguished members, and to the Black Workers Center and all others who have business before this committee. This is the 50th year. 1968 was a fighting year for black people with the death of Dr. King and others. We find it ironic that here we are again. We have to fight. Within 50 years, not much has changed except our indomitable spirit to fight. Black workers are faced with some of the most discriminatory practices in this city, in this state, and in this nation. But we're here to fight. One of the greatest and most positive fights that we have had is bringing our case before elected officials, judicial bodies, and saying we want to be treated fairly. Today we're here with the same voice, the same cry, and the same types of discriminatory practices happening in this city. We want to be treated fairly. We want to have the opportunity to exercise all of our abilities to be great, outstanding workers. So we're here, urging you again as the history to pass legislation that will be fully funded to help us to be who God has invented us and encouraged us to be. God bless you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, community and committee members. I'm Malcolm Harris, Senior Lead Organizer with the LA Black Workers Center. LA's black community migrated from the South in large numbers in the 40s and 50s for work opportunities, only to find many of the same issues we face down south, out west too. Redlining, also known as segregation, low wages and discrimination, and limited access to resources. We applaud the efforts of the committee and the city attorney in drafting this civil and human rights ordinance. We're almost there, but generational concerns of fear, retaliation, and no justice still exist. In 2018's Trump era, 50% of LA's black population remains either unemployed or drastically underemployed, and black and brown workers face discrimination in many of our workplaces. We urge the city to be ready to enforce this ordinance locally through the Bureau of Contract Administration, which currently enforces Ban the Box, in collaboration with the Civil Rights Commission, and working closely with trusted community groups to educate the community through culturally appropriate outreach that deepens confidence in our city's agencies.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Wayne. Mr. Wayne from Encino.
It's good. Thank you so much. And Mr. Cedillo for existing the First Amendment. So the first thing we need to do is recuse Herb Wesson from this vote because he's a civil rights violator per se. We're going to get him off this commission and off this vote. Then we also got to get Nuri off this vote because she's been allowing pimping and pandering for all that time down on Van Nuys Boulevard, Sepulveda Boulevard, everything else. Women should not have to work as prostitutes to eat a dinner and put food on the table for their kids. It's got to stop.
Please stay on topic.
What?
Please stay
You're
on topic.
crazy. What you mean topic? The topic is civil rights, and that's what we need to start doing. I don't need to have some fool telling me I'm not talking about civil rights. So I'll pass, and I'll say, Mr. Cedillo, take this over and get those two fools off this committee, and let's get this done today. Thank you.
Thank you. You have questions? Yeah. Okay. We've got a report from the city attorney on the proposed ordinance from the CLA. Yeah. Mr. Shea, this would be an appropriate time for you to join us.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Hold on, sir. Hold on.
I apologize. My name is Andy Galan with the Office of the Chief
Andy,
Legislative
yeah.
Analyst. I apologize.
See, Andy, it's your first day. We're going to give you a really hard time. We're going to insist that you speak loud so people can hear you.
Okay.
Identify yourself. Take
My
a
name
breath
is
and
Andy.
speak slowly.
Apologize. My name is Andy Lan with the CLA's office. In February of this year, the council requested the city attorney prepare an ordinance establishing a Civil and Human Rights Commission. In June, the city attorney presented the draft ordinance before this committee, and the CLA was directed to report, with assistance of the CAO, on the fiscal impact of creation of the commission, recommendations for administrative penalty structures, and how those penalties could be collected. In relation to the fiscal impact, the CAO has provided a preliminary estimate of approximately $600,000 for 4 positions over 9 months, with a full year's budget to be determined once the workload has been defined. It is important to note that the governor has appointed an advisory group within the Department of Fair Employment and Housing to report on the feasibility of lifting FEHA preemption and allowing cities to enforce anti-discrimination laws currently enforced by the state. The group will make its recommendations to the governor prior to the end of the year. If the committee would like to move forward with creation of the commission, our report recommends the city attorney be requested to bifurcate the proposed ordinance into 2 ordinances, one establishing the commission and the second establishing the anti-discrimination ordinance. Bifurcating the proposed ordinance would allow the commission to be established and create the infrastructure required to implement the anti-discrimination ordinance. Our report also includes several options for administrative penalty structures and how collected penalties may be divided between the complainant and the city. The council may continue to consider these issues until the commission is established. Our report recommends that the commission, once established, be requested to review and make recommendations on administrative penalty structures, the allocation of collective penalties, and an educational campaign to inform residents on the commission and the complaint process. In addition, we'd recommend that the CAO be instructed to report back on the source of funds and resources requested for the commission. If the committee would like to expand council oversight, the committee may consider and request the city attorney make the appropriate amendments. These may include specifying the number of commissioners, qualifications, and providing for council appointment authority. In addition, the executive director may also be required to report to council annually. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for further questions.
Any questions from the committee, Mr. Price?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just first of all thank all the citizens who came out to make comments on all these issues, especially on 6. A special shout out to the Black Workers Center. They've been very eloquent in words and in verbally and non-verbally, and I appreciate your comments and the activism that you displayed, not just here in LA, but up in Sacramento as well. We know that employment discrimination is something that certainly has impacted the African American community for a long, long time. Also, the brown community and others. And so we really want to try to figure out how to make sure that this commission, has the power and the scope to address a variety of problems, a variety of issues and concerns. So let me just ask a couple of questions to the CLA to begin with. We keep hearing about this preemption issue. Can you kind of just outline what we are preempted from acting on by state and federal law?
So the main issue being the preemption clause in the Fair Employment and Housing Act, which prevents all cities and localities from enforcing any provisions contained within the Fair Employment and Housing Act. So these would include enforcing discrimination complaints in housing and employment for a variety of protected classes contained within the act. These would include race, color, ancestry, national origin, religion, creed, age, disability, whether mental and physical, sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, medical condition, genetic information, marital status. And under the proposed ordinance, there are also 4 additional classes which are not currently covered under FEHA, and these would include immigration status, partnership status, income status, and veteran status.
How does the Governor Brown's veto of Senate Bill 491, which was, I understand, designed to lift that exemption, how does the governor's veto impact the proposed commission's work?
The SB 491 was designed to look at lifting the preemption of FEHA. Essentially, the advisory group, which is currently putting together recommendations for the feasibility of lifting FEHA, was a direct response to the governor's veto. Essentially, it delays the lifting of FEHA until proper recommendations are made to the governor.
And as you mentioned, the governor did establish. Sorry, continue.
Mike Dunn, City Attorney's Office. Just one quick addition to that. Ultimately, by the time SB 491 made it to the governor's desk, it was just a request to create a commission to look at this issue. And the governor, being Governor Brown, who he is, in the interest of sort of legislative economy, decided I don't need a bill to create a commission, so we vetoed it and then immediately ordered the commission to be created. So it's the process is still moving on as if the legislation had been passed. It's just the way that.
Okay, well, I know the process is moving on, and I know that many in this room are in fact actively engaged in those deliberations.
Absolutely, I believe there's a member from the Los Angeles Black Worker Center on the advisory group as well. If this committee is interested, I believe John Reamer was also appointed the member. He could come to this meeting and provide a report on the status of those discussions.
Good. Well, can we invite John Reamer up to the table? John, won't you join us?
Sorry, I didn't see him in the audience.
It's okay.
Good afternoon, John Reamer, Bureau of Contract Administration.
Mr. Reamer, thank you for your participation, and it's good to see that you were selected to be a part of this advisory committee along with others. Can you give us some details of where you see this advisory committee moving?
We've had several opportunities to speak to the issue as it relates to the core issue of preemption in the areas of discrimination and being able to enforce it on the local level. What we have before us now as a group is a draft report that we are reviewing. We're going to be meeting, having a phone conference next month, and when I say next month, the beginning of October, to discuss it and give our final comments. It will be then transmitted to the governor for his review and consideration. It speaks to, without going into details, because it is a draft format, it just speaks to the pros and cons surrounding this. I can't speak for all the other members, but I don't see there being much opposition to the notion of the advantages of local agencies participating in the effort to eradicate discrimination. The more hands you have working to address the issue, the better it will be to identify it and root it out. So I would say it's moving in a positive direction.
Mm-hmm. Should we be using the BCA, due to BCA's experience, dealing with issues of wage theft and other issues that intersect with this proposed new commission in the subject area? Do you think BCA could be an appropriate partner agency?
Should you be using us?
Yeah. Should we be using you?
We certainly have a lot of experience in dealing with this. We stand ready to respond any way the city family wants us to. After the process goes through the state path, what would happen is, far be it from me to tell you, but we would have to put an ordinance in place that would empower whatever entity or vehicle we choose to use. BCA certainly can be one of them. Currently, our role in the city involves a number of areas when it comes to enforcement and investigation, when it comes to the treatment of workers or individuals, be it from prevailing wage or living wage or minimum wage. So ours would be a place where it could be placed and we could effectively address the issue.
Good. Well, I think we're on the right road with this. I think that the inclusive discussion that we're having with all parties is an important component. When it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, I do have a couple of recommendations that I'd like to make. One, that we instruct the CLA and the BCA and city attorney to monitor the preemption piece and report back on how the city can expand the ordinance in order to cover other disenfranchised groups, and how we can utilize BCA to enforce anti-discrimination policies. And secondly, that we instruct CLA with the assistance of BCA to report back on how we can improve community outreach and education regarding discrimination practices and workers' rights. So again, just doing all we can to involve the community, include the community, and make sure we're getting the right kind of input as we move this historic and very significant commission idea forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Several questions. So how long did it take for the Department of Cannabis Regulation to be set up? Did they follow the same process? Because it's my understanding that the DCR, they first appointed the commission and the executive director, and then they created the rules and regulations for the commission. So I just want to make sure that we're not being given the runaround and that we're all playing by the same rules.
So the rollout of the commission was established based on the process for the cannabis regulation rollout, which I believe took approximately 8 months. As far as any similarities, the commission was created through the ordinance, which is its own separate process, and was modeled after other civil or human rights or relation commissions. So other than the rollout, in order to identify the appropriate workload, there isn't much similarity in how the rollout would proceed.
I don't understand anything you just said.
I apologize.
Councilmember, the ordinance was drafted by our office to include both the commission and the actual enforcement ordinance at the same time, because
Oh, so it was done together.
That was the request
Okay.
that came.
That
from
was the
this
request that came from
committee.
council.
But we would advise that it would make sense to have the enforcement agency in place, whether it be this new commission or, if the council decides, BCA, in place before the claims started coming, because those claims would just fall on deaf ears if there was no one to receive them.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I follow you now. And the other question I had is, how does the estimated cost of $680,000 that the CAO's office suggested would cost to create the commission compared to the other costs to set up any other commission in the city? How does that cost compare?
I would refer you to the CAO's office for that.
Do you understand my question?
Yep. How much money are we spending on pot and how much money are we spending on people? That's the fundamental question.
I missed that last part.
I said,
sorry.
how much money are we spending on pot and how much money are we spending on people? That's the
So your estimated cost to create this commission is $680,000, correct?
Yes.
How does that compare to any other commission in the city that we've helped establish?
We haven't run a direct comparison, but the numbers are based on just the average salary costs. I mean, these are very basic numbers. It's very baseline. There's nothing special in there. It's really just the expenses we would anticipate that those staff would need, just office space, computers, furniture, those expenses plus the staffing costs and the related costs that go along with those. And we would anticipate that those would be about the same as any other commission that we would be starting, unless that other commission had specific work that was beyond just startup. So this is really just to get them started and have the executive director to have the proper support to be able to work with the commission to draft guidelines, procedures, and rules and regulations for how the commission would proceed.
And do you know what is the professional makeup of commissioners in other cities with existing civil rights and human rights commissions look like? Do we know that? Do we have a sense of what the field of expertise are, where they are, what kinds of individuals are actually seeking to appoint to these commissions? Do we have a sense of that?
It's largely the individuals largely come from a legal background, and that's essentially the case for any commission, which does in fact require qualifications to sit on the commission.
Okay, well, I want to change that a bit. I want to change it up a bit. So, Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't have a problem moving the CLA's recommendation, but I would like to add additional language that would include council oversight on the following ways, if I may.
Yes, please, go forward.
Right, so I want to recommend that we allow for one or more commissioners to be appointed by the city council or the council president. Two, that the commissioner qualifications may include but not limited to legal expertise, human resources experience, or any other relevant experience.
I'm sorry, would the committee like to specify a specific number of commissioners?
Not yet, sir, I'm not done. Okay. And then the other thing I'd like to include is that the ordinance also require an annual reporting by the executive director to the city council. What I specified in my first recommendation is one or two commissioners be appointed by the city council and the council president. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Price? Mr. Shea, you've been waiting patiently. I'm interested in you opining on the questions of bifurcating the commission and the ordinance, and whether or not this is distinct from our recent efforts around cannabis. I have a sense that we've got a longer history in immigration rights and reform than we do on the legalization question of cannabis, and that they're distinct and that we may not need to bifurcate the two, but I'm interested in your perspective on this.
Yeah. Well, appreciate the question. You know, I'm not positive I have a strong feeling. I think I do have a slight inclination to think that if the committee could give us another month, I've not had meetings or communication with the legislative analysts, so they kind of just went off, you know, doing their best, but they just kind of went off and did their thing. Whereas we have had discussions with the city attorney's office, and I've prepared and shared with you, and I'd be happy to share with the other members a chart that lists the ordinance as the advocates had proposed it, based on meeting with hundreds of community people, and then the city attorney's version, and then a column that describes the difference between the two. And I mean, I think that by and large the spirit is very similar. I haven't seen what the legislative analysts have put together, so I cannot comment on that. But certainly in terms of what I had prepared, based on discussions both with committee members but also with numerous groups in the community and the city attorney's draft, the spirit of those is the same. There are clearly some differences, and there's some differences both as to the structure of the commission, as well as there's some differences as to the rules and the duties and responsibilities of the commission. But I think my own sense is that in a relatively short time, and I don't mean months, because I don't have that kind of time. I'm talking about maybe next couple of weeks. I think that we could meet and we could synthesize the the two versions so that the city attorney's office is happy, I'm happy, and hopefully the legislative analyst is happy. But I don't think that would take long because I don't think there are major differences, but there are some significant differences. For example, I'll just give you one example. The way I envision this, a person who files a complaint would first sort of get the complaint heard by the director, executive director, would be authorized to try to resolve complaints. If the executive director was unsuccessful resolving a complaint, the way I envisioned it, it would then go to the commission or a panel of the commission, or one commissioner or two commissioners. If the person was unhappy with that, and I wanted that as the second step because it's informal, it's easy, it's accessible. If a person was unhappy with that, with the commission's decision, whether it was the complainant or the respondent, the way I drafted it, they could then go see an administrative law judge, a necessary step, and only then could they go to court if they wanted to go to court. In the city attorney's draft, they switched those two. They put director first, then the ALJ, then the commission, then you can go to court. And I felt that from my experience dealing with marginalized communities, they're going to do a lot better going to a commission that's got very relaxed rules. You don't really feel like you need a lawyer than going to an administrative law judge. Most of them walk around with a 3-inch book about the rules of evidence and this. It's almost like being in a court. But we've discussed that and a handful of other differences, and I at least have the sense based on our discussion that these are things that just need a little bit more time to percolate and for us to, and I really think, you can tell me if I'm wrong, I think we can do that in 3 weeks. I think it'll take 1 or 2 meetings, and I think we'll have it worked out. And that would go both for language that deals with the commission and the structure of the commission, as well as with language on the substantive rules. So it's a tough question. I think my inclination, I'm not sure what gave rise to the notion that we should bifurcate it and get this commission set up right away and then sort of figure out what it's going to do, hopefully very quickly, a month later. But if we are going to accomplish that quickly, maybe, I'm just suggesting maybe, it's better to sort of do it as one package, but with a real commitment that we would get you, that at least these 3 groups would meet, that we would get you something, let's say, a week before your next meeting, which is a fairly tight timetable, 3 weeks from now. Then that way, when you're looking at the final product, because there are different ideas, even about the structure of the commission. I thought the commission would be all volunteers. So I would have 14 commissioners instead of 4 because they're not getting paid anyway. And that way, if you get 10 complaints in, they can start dividing them up pretty quickly. If you only have 4 commissioners, they could get overwhelmed pretty quickly. There were minor things like that I think we could work out pretty quickly, and that way you would have a total package. You'd have a total package in front of you. It would have Part A, which is the commission, and it would have Part B, which is the rules. And the way that I had drafted it, and really the city attorney as well, it's not going to be necessary for this executive director or the commission to spend 6 months writing its rules, because I've spent 6 months studying the rules that other cities have adopted that have human rights commissions, and we've got most of the rules, including the city attorney's draft. We haven't dotted the I's and crossed the T's, but most of the basic rules about the functioning are there. And I'll just add one other thing, and then I'll shut up. And that is the one thing I haven't written out, but I've talked to a lot of people about, and there's very, very strong support for, and it was echoed in many of the comments that were made today, the public comments. And that is, and I've mentioned this to folks, to most of you, but I just haven't written it out, and I think it can be written out pretty quickly. And that is that I think there has to be a critical a significant amount of resources that are going to be tossed at this ought to go towards a community component, a component of self-empowerment, a component of community trainings, a component of the community playing a role in at least preparing the complaints, assessing the complaints, filing the complaints, having a monitoring role. So just like with the immigration business, if people aren't educated about it, it's worthless. And to be honest, I would, this might be a little different and a little radical, but instead of whatever it is, 600,000, a million, 2 million, whatever it is that's dumped into this, I wouldn't give control of that community component to even the executive director. I would think about a collaborative of community-based groups, black, brown, immigrants, faith-based groups, labor unions, a collaborative 12, 14 groups that are working together, and let them do that part. Let them do the community part with some resources from the city. Let them handle the training, not be told by the commission what to do. They probably know more about this than the commission will know. You know, they're the ones at the front lines dealing with people who are suffering discrimination. So I would like to see a very robust community part to this that feeds into the commission, but isn't beholden to the commission. One other thing I'll just mention is the way I envision this. I would have more than 4. I would have 12, 14 commissioners. And the way I set it up, the city council would appoint like 8 of them. Maybe the mayor would appoint 3, and maybe the city attorney, if they wanted to, could appoint 1 or 2. But I hate to put the fate of this commission without saying anything disparaging about the current mayor. That's one person, and that could swing this way or that way politically. The city council is unlikely to quite swing that way. It's more likely to be stable. So I would like to see, and the way I had drafted it, the city council is really mostly in the driver's seat on this thing, and including reports back. You'd mentioned that you'd like to see reports from the executive director to the city council. That is definitely a component of the draft that I had. So I don't have a strong opinion on your question. I have given you a draft motion. If you wanted to just move forward like right now and say we want to appoint a commission, I have shared with you a draft motion that excludes all the substance of the draft that the city attorney and I prepared, and it's just got the commission stuff. But if we're really committed to move this and not delay it and really address it at the next meeting and reach some final decisions, I think that the 3 entities sitting at this table, if it is 3, I think we could accomplish a unified document, and I think that's what at least my inclination would be.
One second, please. Yes.
Councilmember Mike Dunn, the City Attorney's Office again. The one, I think Mr. Shea makes one important point with respect to the fleshing out of details that this committee may be interested in. The only clarification that I would make with respect to the process that he suggested is that now that the ordinance has been submitted in response to your initial motion, the request to amend it would have to come from the council. And so, to sort of put the two pieces together, there could be at the next meeting almost a chart of all of his suggestions that the council members could go through and either adopt or leave aside. And then that would become the instruction to our office to amend the ordinance as this committee and then the full council saw fit. That's an option for how to proceed. If there is interest in, I've not seen Mr. Shea's memo, but maybe you have in making some of those changes. None of the language in this ordinance is, or I shouldn't say none, but a lot of the language is flexible and that can be changed at this council's discretion. We simply drafted the ordinance in response to the direct request from the original motion, so therefore there is a lot of opportunity to make changes as you guys see fit, including the number, the scope, the appointment of the members, and such like that. So.
Great, and I appreciate that, and I heard you say draft, and that's the operating phrase here. I don't think this is cooked. I think we're about 99% of the way there. I applaud your work and your effort, the collaboration that's taken place. As my colleague said, the incredible input from the community. We've heard that loud and clear. So I think we're not quite there, and so what I want to do is that we move this item to the next meeting because we're almost done, and I want to instruct you guys, Mr. Shea, to continue your conversations with the CLA office. There are some things that are evident, but we're not just there yet, and then we can come back. So exactly what you said, but not yet. So that then when the council does have matters before it, it has matters that are pretty much cooked. If we don't like the way it's cooked, then we can address it at that time, but we don't want to give them something that's, we're not neither soup nor water. And so we want to wait till we get to that point. I think this is so important. This is so significant. As I tell my staff every day, we only have one chance to do it right the first time. And so I want to do this at the next meeting because we're so close. And this way we have an opportunity to continue to think about this critically and then be prepared to come back and have the most serious discussion that we can have on this when we come back in an item and in a form that's close to complete. Okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Price. You good with that? Yes?
I just want to make sure the instructions I read off, you took note of that?
Mine as well.
We need to have so we're going to continue the item?
You got it.
No.
Continue the item.
No, we're continuing the item. Sorry, Marissa. We're continuing the item to the next meeting. Okay. Concur? So be the order. Item number, what's next? I'm not looking in that direction. Item 7? We have one comment. Item 7 is up next. Thank you, members of the community who have joined us today.
Item number 7 is a Board of Police Commissioners report relative to researching human trafficking in Los Angeles and the development of the initial human trafficking task force.
Mr. Wayne? Mr. Spindler, please join us.
All right. And thank you so much again. Brown Act, First Amendment in the house. So, the expert here for the whole city on human trafficking, of course, is Nuri Martinez. Nuri, the female pimp, knows everything about this issue. She loves pimping. She loves prostitution. Because if she didn't, why isn't she shutting down all those hotels on Sepulveda Boulevard? Why isn't she shutting down all those places? You know, that's where we started the song. Nuri. Nuri. Nuri, the female pimp. That's where we got the song
To our
from.
committee,
So
not to anybody
the
specific
day
on the
that
committee.
we can drive down Sepulveda Boulevard from Burbank all the way up to Roscoe Boulevard and not see any more prostitution is going to be a happy day for all of us. So we urge Gil Cedillo to take over CD6, and he will clean it up. Thank you all.
Item number 7. Want to announce it?
I did read it.
Please.
Will you read it again?
Please.
Okay. Item number 7 is a Board of Police Commissioners report relative to researching human trafficking in Los Angeles and the development of the initial human trafficking task force.
Thank you.
Commander, nice to see you. Do you miss the valley yet?
Not yet.
Thank you very much. The chair had to step down for just a second. So I just want to say I want to thank the chair for scheduling this motion. And we had a great discussion back in April about the department's efforts on this issue of human trafficking. And since then, I am very pleased to say that there were some budgetary decisions that were made to secure funding for overtime expenses for both the Valley and the South Bureau's human trafficking forces. So I just want to applaud the department. I think we've made tremendous strides in this area, but again, I think we need to continue to ensure that we cover this citywide and that we continue to talk to one another. It is imperative that all city departments, the city council, and the police department are on the same page. That's why I've requested to continue this motion. So why don't we go ahead and start with your presentation, and then I'll have some questions of you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Councilwoman and Councilmember Price. So Commander Rodriguez from the Los Angeles Police Department. So early in June, the chief ordered all 4 bureaus to stand up a human trafficking unit to specifically deal with this. Now, Valley Bureau and South Bureau had 2 dedicated sets of officers already that were specifically working the human trafficking task force. For instance, Valley Bureau currently has 1 lieutenant, 2 supervisors, and 8 police officers. And South Bureau has 1 lieutenant, 1 supervisor, and 5 sergeants that are strictly dedicated to working this type of crime. Central Bureau and West Bureau, however, did not have dedicated resources, and since the month of June, they've stood up units in their respective bureaus. However, the units are not permanent yet. At the moment, they're working on a part-time basis. They do have 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and 9 police officers in West Bureau, and I have the lieutenant here with me that he can go into details for West Bureau if you like. And also the one in Central Bureau is currently at 2 sergeants and 8 officers. At the moment, those 2 details are working on a pre-planned basis. They go out anywhere from 4 to 6 times on a month, depending on their availability. And they're then supplemented by our human trafficking task force at the citywide level in assisting not only with training, but some of the investigations or detailed investigations that also come from some of the human trafficking issues that they encounter. So at the moment, we do have all 4 working. 2 are in the process of, hopefully, in the near future, they'll become full-time.
Do you have anything else to add? Who wants to go next?
So this is Lieutenant
Murray.
Scott Murray. He's
We
very,
kinda know this
very
guy.
well versed.
I think he used to hang out in the valley too. Nice to see you, Lieutenant.
Real quick, council member, I'm Captain Cynthia Lee from Detective Support and Vice Division. I oversee the human trafficking unit for the city. Back on August 22nd, we did a citywide training day that involved all the vice personnel and anyone that had to do with vice. Human trafficking, we brought in Department of Probation, we brought in Department of Children, Family Services, and a lot of other entities that, non-governmental entities that would have a part or a role in any of the human trafficking that the bureaus will become involved in, so that we could all get on the same page and start, since some were starting from scratch, that they would know the protocols, procedures, availability, responsibilities of everyone that was involved.
Anyone else?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Do you want to get you might want to change seats. I don't know if that microphone reaches you, but, or scoot, you guys can scoot in and he can scoot next to one of you. That's probably a better spot.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman, and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. As the commander indicated, West Bureau has stood up our human trafficking task forces that operate as an ancillary or supplemental duty for our supervisors and officers. We conducted 2 3-day operations subsequent to the direction from Office of Operations in July and August. Those were 3-day task forces where we brought together the assigned officers with support of the divisional vice units. During those operations, we arrested 3 pimp suspects, one specifically with the support of Lieutenant Watts' human trafficking squad for a multi-floor human trafficking case where 2 juveniles were rescued along with 2 adults from the Western Corridor. We totaled 3 juvenile rescues for the operations, and we had advocates and counselors from Journey Out assist us in contacting the additional 68 suspects that were detained and arrested along the Western Corridor and in hotel operations.
So as you're aware, Journey Out is one of our great partners that we've worked very closely with in the Valley, and one of the things that we're doing is expanding their services not only to West Bureau but also to Central as well. I know South Bureau has an agency that they've been dealing with for some time and have been very successful in a lot of the rescues as well. So what we're hoping to do is utilize the Valley Bureau model as well as South Bureau, although Valley Bureau has had better success, and hopefully get those 2 units instituted in West Bureau and Central Bureau on a permanent basis. And that is the ultimate goal.
I have a few questions, Mr. Chair. Yes, please. So, Commander, can you talk a little bit about your internal timeline in the department in setting up the different human trafficking task force? Specifically, I want to hear about staffing up these task force with permanent positions, of course. And I know we indicated that we would do this by the first quarter of 2019. So what does that look like internally?
Correct. So right now we're in the midst of identifying positions that are going to be sent back out to patrol, with the patrol function being one of the primary focus. The secondary positions that we're going to be looking at is the permanent creation of these units here. One of the things that we're looking at, as Captain stated, all of the vice officers have received the training and they are now capable of operating in such configuration. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is perhaps taking some of these officers that are currently assigned to vice that have been had this training into these permanent units. We will be looking at that probably at the beginning of the year once the patrol configuration is done. And we're looking at getting those 2 task forces, Central Bureau and West Bureau, staffed on a more permanent basis.
But how would that work, since I know that due to the budget request, some of these vice units in certain divisions have been downsized?
Correct. So what we're going to be looking at doing is replacing some of those vice officers that are currently operating in there now with some experience and utilizing them for the permanent human trafficking task forces. We're going to be looking at bringing some new officers once we identify all of the patrol functions that are now going to be full, and we're going to be staffing some of these vice units up to not quite the numbers that they had once upon a time, but to the point where they're going to be operational. Another thing that we're looking at the vice units is some of the stuff that they're doing now. The ABC checks, are we going to be able to do better collaborations and partnership with ABC themselves so that we can move some of the tasks that our vice units are currently doing so that they're not tasked with that function at the moment. So therefore, they can focus a little more not only on the human trafficking aspect of it, but on some of the other functions that they're also tasked with. In Hollywood, for instance, some of the ABC locations, establishments, some of the bars, and some of the ancillary duties, or some of the other duties that they currently do right now, is we're looking to perhaps pass some of those responsibilities over to some of the partners that we currently work with, and they come in on a limited basis now. We're hoping to get them to come and join with us and hand off that responsibility over to them.
And do you have an estimated cost of what the additional positions would cost? Do you have this conversation?
We have not had that conversation yet, no.
Yeah, we should, because that's how we're going to advocate for these positions.
Okay.
I have a question for DSVD. So when the Bureau identifies a human trafficking victim, what is the capacity for you to assist an actual victim or multiple victims when we're actually rescuing some of these victims off the street? What is your current capacity? And what does that look like?
Right now, council member, my human trafficking unit is staffed with 2 supervisors and 4 investigators. But we are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, either in the office or through our department command post. We will handle any rescue that involves a juvenile citywide, and we will provide assistance, investigative assistance, personnel assistance with any other individuals that the Human Trafficking Task Force is investigating. Whether that is us taking over a case or providing as much assistance as we can, we are there to assist them no matter what.
But you only have 4 bodies, is that correct?
That is correct.
So what I'm trying to get to is then how do you assist the other 4 bureaus when we're up and running? How would you be able to assist the 4 bureaus with 4 limited staff? How are you currently funded? Does your department come from your unit funded by a special grant? Or how are we divvying up these resources so we can better staff or assist the other 4 bureaus?
As of right now, ma'am, our unit does not have any outside funding. We did up until, I believe, last month when it ran out. And so any funding or any...
What, did you have a grant that ran out last month? Or?
We were given a grant through the LA County Sheriff's Department. They shared with us that ended in August.
And it's not going to get renewed?
Unfortunately, when it was time to apply for it, we started to apply for it, and due to I won't say bad timing, but due to miscommunication, we missed the date. I don't know if the sheriffs have applied for it or not.
How much was that?
Last year we received, or 2 years ago, $250,000.
And I take it this is before you were assigned to this?
It was
new
right
unit?
about the
Right
first
at the
month
same
that I
time.
came in.
I figured.
Yeah, for the first month I came in.
The other question I had was, can you speak a little bit about the new uniform reporting system that you'll be adopting to assist DSVD with collecting data from each bureau? Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
I will let Lieutenant Watts speak on that, ma'am, if that's okay.
Good afternoon. The uniform reporting system that is currently in place has a special coding for any human trafficking victims, as well as the different investigations that could come out of it. So that makes it easier for us to track and run numbers when asked for ComStat or any other situation. So the codes are actually already in existence.
So you are currently using that system to collect data on human trafficking victims?
Yes.
Okay, and how are you sharing it? Is that being communicated back to each bureau? They can access the same data, or does it run through your unit?
No, they can access it as well through their CAD.
And so my next question is, so how does the human trafficking unit work with other department entities to make sure that we're all communicating and that we're all on the same page or using the same tactics?
When you say other departments or
I'm just going based on your report. I mean, your report does state that you work with the district attorney's office to implement the legislative policies that we adopt as the city council. But how are you then communicating to other entities that we're all on the same page with other bureaus, with other city departments? How are we all getting on that same page? I know you communicate with the city attorney's office based on the legislation that we passed, but how does then that get communicated to the rest of the city?
Well, that was one of the reasons that we had the citywide training, so that we all would be on the page. We had the district attorney that human trafficking deals with also to come out and discuss their policies and procedures, so that everyone, I mean, it's kind of hard for us to reach out to everyone, so that everyone was there so that we would all receive the same information. The Detective Teague, who is in charge of the human trafficking unit, speaks all the time, as far as Lieutenant Watts, with the Bureau Vice Coordinators, with the Bureau human trafficking officers or supervisors.
So I want to give you an example. Why I'm asking this question is, in the presentation that we had back in April of this year, you mentioned the possibility of having these trafficking signs that would be installed by the department, similar to the transportation signs that we have up in the neighborhoods. And it looks something like this, which is what was shared with me. I know it's before your time, Captain, but and the reason I say this is, you know, it is my understanding that these signs have not been shared with several council offices, and therefore some of these neighborhood and community members might not be in favor of posting signs like this in their neighborhoods. So when we move forward in implementing things, whether it comes out of your unit or a different department, if we're not all communicating and getting on the same page, the resistance that we get out there is amplified. So this is why I'm asking, how do we then communicate with other city departments and council offices so that we are on the same page and we're able to communicate why this is important, why it's being done in their neighborhood, and we actually get some buy-in. And it just helps move our efforts forward into trying to rescue, you know, men and women off the streets.
Okay, I just want to say, yeah, the meeting in April, I was not here, but it was not before my time. I just wasn't present.
I know, and I'm not, trust me, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I know you're not, but it's sort of like an overall, it's a conversation we need to have in terms of how we communicate with each other, because if residents are resistant to posts like this in their neighborhoods, we need to be aware of that. And we just can't blanket certain neighborhoods and say people are going to be okay with it, especially if council offices have not been made aware of this.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to address that.
Sure.
That sign.
Yeah.
And first of all, that was just an ad that we worked with the mayor's office, Council for Women.
Right. The commission.
The Commission on Women. That sign has not been posted because my understanding is it was not approved. It did not go through the process. So we would never post signs like that unless they were. That was specific for a picture that they took because they wanted it for their PR.
Yeah.
Those signs have not been posted.
Yeah, and it's not that I'm certainly not being critical. I think in some areas it makes sense, especially if you have neighborhoods where this is, where human trafficking it's an ongoing issue and there is buy-in from those neighborhoods. But there's certain neighborhoods that just simply, even though the problem exists, would never post something like this in their neighborhoods because they don't want that negative connotation in their communities. And I can see both sides, but I think it's important to constantly just keep us in the loop so that we can be on the same page and do it together.
Well, as far as the Commission on Status of Women, they're the ones who led that operation or that project. So it's our understanding that that was shared with the rest of the council people. It has not been finalized, and we have not heard what the status is of that project. So we'll look into it and make sure that everyone has been
and we share it with
properly.
The council, and that this body is in favor of posting signs like this so we can move forward. But it was also my understanding that DOT did post the signs and they had to be removed.
It was posted for a PR photo.
Oh, I see.
It was not posted for
what you're
permanent.
saying. Okay.
Yeah, I believe what happened, council member, is it was posted for the photo and they forgot to take it down.
Yeah, I got
After the photo, then it was taken down.
The other thing that was mentioned in the presentation back in April, and I know, Captain, you weren't here, is you mentioned these safe zones. So I know you were partnering with the county on these safe zones, and you are now trying to implement it at the city, and you were working with the fire department. My office was not aware of these safe zones until the fire department asked us if we knew what these were, because they knew that we care about this issue and we've been leading on this issue on the council. So how do we sort of, again, get on the same page so that we can move together on this issue? I know that, how do you implement these safe zones? I know a police station is a safe zone, for example, but some of our police stations are not staffed after 10 o'clock p.m. So if there's somebody who walks in that wants help and assistance and there's a sign that says it's a safe zone, how does that work?
This is another project that was begun through the county probation office. It's something they already do in the county areas. Okay. It was a recommendation that we implemented in the city of Los Angeles, but it has not been completed once again. So that's why that information was not expressed to anyone on the council, because it hasn't gotten that far.
All right. Commander.
Yeah, so even though most of our stations now close their doors at 11 p.m., they don't open them again until 6 a.m., there's still a phone. Well, we're hoping, and I understand the safe zone, it's anonymous, you drop it off. Right. There's a phone right outside, and we also have cameras that are looking right on the outside, and we're hoping that if that situation happens and the person does not pick up the phone to at least alert that there's a need out there, that we can pick it up on the camera and make notice that there is a package or something that is being left out there, or a person that is coming to request that assistance, and at that point we will dispatch a unit or go outside and handle the matter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I just have one last question, Mr. Chair. Mr. Price, forgive me for asking this. This pertains to your district, but back in the April meeting, Mr. Price did ask about the demographics of women and girls in his district. Do we have that data yet?
That data in South Bureau would come from South Bureau.
Okay.
Human Trafficking Task Force, which was already in place when that question was asked. We have implemented a new stat sheet, if you call it that, so that now DSVD will actually maintain those statistics from each arrest or each contact that's made by each Bureau task force. So that way when these questions come up, we have a one-stop shop and we can pull those stats.
Great.
So is there any way of pulling that information together now?
I'm sorry, sir?
Any way of pulling that information together? Is there any way of accumulating that data now?
They would have to go back. I'm not sure how South Bureau handles their statistics. I don't have anyone from Valley here, but I know that their statistic sheet may look similar to Valley Bureau's, but I don't have it at the present time. I could go back and find out if they
but you're saying that when the next report, the September report, will be a consolidated report then? Or when is it going to start?
Well, we would have to ask them to go back to January and input all of those statistics, if that's what you're asking for.
No, I'm asking you.
Or we can start now.
As we're moving forward now, what kind of report are you able to generate now that you're receiving all the data from all the areas?
Well, since the implementation of the task forces and the training that we put together last week, that information will start to come in. So hopefully by September we'll have some partial information.
Okay, I got you. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, the only thing I want to add is that I just want to instruct the department to report back in December on statistics specifically to the Valley, West, and South Bureau's task force with actual numbers, so we can figure out what our progress has been, how many people we've locked up for this horrendous crime, and how many women and children we've rescued off the streets.
Thank you. Good question. Okay. Good question.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Just one, we have an intersection with the encampments, obviously in some parts of the city worse than others. But what are we doing with the human trafficking, prostitution, issues related to the homeless encampments? Is it something we're just sort of not looking at? We turn our head, we look at it, we pursue it when called upon? What are we doing?
So, Council Member, as we become aware of that situation, whether it's through an anonymous tip or a tip for the officers or anywhere, we do address those vigorously. If you remember, I believe it was on 55th right over the 110 freeway, we had the small houses.
Right.
Once upon a time, that was a very prevalent activity that became to our attention. Obviously, not only does our vice units address those issues, but in the case now where the human trafficking task forces are operating, as these tips or as this information becomes available to us, we will address it with the appropriate manpower. Obviously, if there's any signs of minors or anything there that would require a higher level of assistance, we do incorporate not only our partners from DCFS, for other agencies, but as well as our partners here from Detective Support and Vice Division.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, is there another item on the agenda?
No, no, sir.
I think we're just receiving and file this report. We say note and file here, right? Yes. So the instructions.
Get my instructions?
The report itself, it's a note and file report plus your instructions.
Correct.
Okay. Now the proper question is, any other items before us?
No, sir.
Okay. Absent any other items, this committee is adjourned. Okay. Thank you.